Bismillah, Assalamu alaikum. In today's video, I'll be refuting yet another icon of evolution, whale evolution. Now, this is probably one of the most important icons because this is seen as one of the biggest proofs for Darwinism. Now, this is an argument for evolution, right? So, I'll be refuting it inshallah, and I'll be framing it as because when theists make argument, like when we make arguments for existence of God, right, or for Islam, for example, we make Islam argument of prophecies of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we have the burden of proof, right? So when atheists are making an argument, they have the burden of proof. I'll be framing it like that, and inshallah, we'll seeing whether their argument stands to scrutiny or not. Let's get started. So here's the basic claim. Darwin initially made a claim that bears or land mammals can turn into whales. There was initially no fossils to support this claim, but in the 1990s, some fossils were discovered that to supposedly prove this claim. Right? There were two fossils found by basically 1859 called Dorodon and Basilosaurus. Now these are fully aquatic whales. There was an extinct wolf-like animal, a land mammal called Pakicetus, found in Pakistan in 1980s. This was older than the earlier two fossils. Although this animal looked nothing like a whale, a bone in its middle ear resembled something that had been previously found only in whales and dolphins and porpoises, a bone called an involucrum. So basically, the bone was similar, so it was assumed that this is the common ancestor of whales. The possibility that the involucrum originated more than once was not considered, although similarity exists in nature in many cases that cannot possibly be due to common descent. So, I mean, this doesn't prove the atheist claim. It doesn't even come close to doing that. There were more fossils found that can supposedly be put in a transition series. Like this, basically starting from the bottommost animal Pakicetus to the topmost blue whale, right? Now, by the way, keep one thing in mind. The top three are fully aquatic whales: Dorodon, Basilosaurus, and the blue whale. These are fully aquatic whales. The bottom five are land mammals that live their lives primarily on land. Keep this in mind as well. This figure, which is often used by atheist evolutionary biologists, actually distorts some things to fit the evolutionary story. Basilosaurus and Dorodon are contemporary of each other, and basically, let's just ignore the uh, time lap issues for now, at least temporal order issues. We'll get to the issue of time later, but the temporal order issues about which these is first and second, that can be ignored momentarily. All of the walking whales, firstly, these are constructed from incomplete skeletons. For example, for Pakicetus, we only have a skull, and the fourth one from the bottom, Kachicetus, is actually smaller than the previous ones before it. So there is basically there are minor issues with this series, but there are major issues as well. In any case, none of the fossils in this figure are actually ancestors and descendants of the others. And this is something even atheist evolutionary biologists will admit. According to paleontologist Kevin Padian, this is because Ambulocetus, Rhodocetus, Pakicetus, and other forms each have their own distinguishing characteristics which they would have to lose in order to be considered direct ancestors of the other known forms. The forms in the figure between basically all the the bottom five, right? They all live primarily on land, and Maiacetus, one of these forms, was actually a pregnant female, right? Or the fossil we have of it is of a pregnant female with a fetus inside it. And the reason we know from the fossil we can judge the fetal skeleton is positioned for a head first birth. This is a universal birthing posture in large bodied land mammals, but one that is anomalous in fully aquatic marine mammals. So it had features of land mammals. These are basically land mammals. We'll come to this animal later. The supposed walking whales, the land ancestors of whale, supposed land ancestors of whales, right? These lived primarily on land. They were not fully aquatic or even mostly aquatic. None of these animals were really whales or even close to the whale. These animals can be considered similar to sea lions and otters. This is a sea lion. These animals spend part or most of their lives on land, some of their lives in the water. But whales, dolphins, and the porpoises, uh, which is basically where these land animals evolved to, spend all of their lives in the water. So there are major differences. Clearly, there are important differences between fully aquatic cetaceans, that's the order of whales, and amphibious mammals such as otters and sea lions, which these fossils, the walking whales, supposedly actually resemble more. Pachycetus. Now let's go to the some of the contentions, other contentions to this argument. Right? There's another problem here. There's a classification problem. Remember Pachycetus, the first walking whale to be discovered, right? It was classified as a cetacean ancestor of whales because it possessed an involucrum. Yet it turns out Indohyus also possesses an involucrum, but it is not considered a cetacean. Instead, it is classified in the order of mammals that includes pigs, hippopotamuses, giraffes, antelopes, sheep, and cattle. So basically, this bone is the reason for classifying Indo-Pakicetus as a cetacean, as a whale. But this bone can also be present in mammals that are not cetaceans. And this is something even atheist evolutionary biologists themselves acknowledge, as you can see from this reference. So the reason to characterize these walking whales, supposed walking whales, as cetaceans in the same order as whales, that reasoning is worthless now, because this was the argument given then, and this argument doesn't work. There's another even bigger problem here. Fully aquatic whales appear in the fossil records 40 million years ago. The land mammals appear 2 to 8 million years before that. So there's an 8 million years time for transition to take place from land mammals to fully aquatic whales. Now, what type of changes are required for this? Turns out there's an actually massive amount of changes required. There is features related to how these the whales swim. The breathing system of theirs is completely different from the land mammals. There are major changes required for reproductory organs of whales. There's a lot of problems here. A lot of things need to change. Absolute massive amount of things need to change for these land mammals to turn into whales. Right now, how can we know how much time it would take? Because the fossil record gives the time of 8 million years, right? How do we know how much time there is for transition from land mammals to whales? Well, we can do a comparison with basically okapi and giraffes. These are very similar animals, right? There is not actually no direct way to estimate the time required for whale evolution, but we can actually use an indirect estimate. Okapi and giraffe are very similar animals. Their common ancestor existed 11 million years ago. There is little difference to the compared to the differences for the whale series, right? If only this took 11 million years, then the this much change, right? These are land animals. One just basically has a longer neck, and there are some minor changes that go with it. If only this took 11 million years, how much more time it would have taken for all the changes in whales to take place? There is not nearly enough time for this. Basically, a biologist, Richard Sternberg, estimated the time. I think the time he estimated was 43.3 million years would be required for all the change for land mammals to turn into whales. I think that's the time. I'm not exactly sure, but his time was similar to this, the one I'm mentioning, right? The time required for the change of whales is 43.3 million years. The time we have is 8 million years. So the amount of work that should take 40, suppose it should take 43 million years, if the atheist if Darwinian evolution is true, took place in 8 million years. So this is a major time gap problem for Darwinian evolution. So even if supposedly this transition took place, right? If supposedly this transition took place as the fossil record if we take the fossil record and say this transition took place, then I think this would falsify Darwinian evolution. Why? Because Darwinian evolution has a specific time frame in which this should occur, and there is not nearly enough time for that. By the way, there are genetic studies that prove my point regarding this as well. They are referenced in the book Zombie Science, the chapter on whale evolution, from which I am getting all of this. I didn't go into detail on that because it would really make this. It would the video would have been very long then. But ignoring all of that for a minute, ignoring the time gap issues, ignoring the anatomical issues, right? Supposedly there was no time limit, no issues with anatomy, and no issue with genetics. This still wouldn't prove Darwinism. Why? Firstly, there are some difference between something being possible and something being plausible and probable. Now, think about the point I'm making. It's not something complicated, it's actually quite simple. Suppose you had all these fossils, right? Exactly the way they are drawn here, with no issues. They're species that can be supposed direct ancestors of each other, right? Supposedly, you have these fossils and there is no time gap problem. Does that prove that this transition took place? No. Basically, the atheist assumption here is that God wouldn't have created such similar creatures independently, or he wouldn't have created the land mammals separately from the walking whales, or an intelligent designer wouldn't have done that. This is something that's assumed. This is something these clowns cannot prove. Not only that, they cannot hope to prove this, right? So the evidence, to be honest, for all the scientific reasons, it's dead basically. But the philosophical problems are massive as well. Think about this. The assumption here is that God wouldn't create such similar creatures independently, or an intelligent designer wouldn't do that. But for a minute, let's just see, just to make a comparison, look at a human designer do things, right? A human can create a human tailor, for example, can make a shirt that's blue, make a shirt that's red, and make a shirt that's black and of different colors. Or a human designer can make independent shirts, one that's dark blue, then another shirt that's a lighter shade of blue, then another that's lighter shade of blue, and on, right? So designers can make things with little differences as well, independently. Just because this series exists, although there are massive scientific issues with the claim about whale evolution, right? But let's suppose none of those issues were there. Just even if these fossils existed, that still wouldn't prove that a Darwinian evolution took place for the philosophical problem I just mentioned. In conclusion, inshallah, I hope you have seen this video. To be honest, you can even ignore the philosophical point, but I don't think you should. The scientific problems for whale evolution are actually more than enough to refute this icon of evolution, and there are a lot of issues here and lot too much assumption here, and there are philosophical problems as well that I think you should think about because it's important. But to be honest, this is the strongest evidence for evolution, even according to atheist evolutionary biologists. If this if this evidence is so weak, right? What about all their other arguments? In conclusion, inshallah, I hope you have enjoyed this video. By the way, do read the book Zombie Science, the specific chapter on whale evolution. That goes into even more depth than I go here, and to be honest, it will open your eyes because the atheist position here is actually very weak, even according to their own criteria. Inshallah, I hope you have enjoyed this video. Please do like the video and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Till next time, Assalamu alaikum.